Okay, good. So I'm Frank Berninger. I'm from here. And I wanted to talk a little bit about things that we have been doing in the last years, actually, about fires and biogeochemical processes. And I wanted to acknowledge a little bit that we have been getting recently funding from the European Union. And before, we have been doing quite a lot of funding, actually. This is Finnish Academy. And I wanted to acknowledge my co-authors, actually. The senior people there are lots of my junior people are here, which were perhaps not so much involved in this work, but my senior people actually there, it's Kaja Köster and Joensuu, Heidi Aaltonen, who's now at the University of Helsinki, and Jukka Pumpanen, who's on the other campus. And how do I go on here? Let me see. Okay. To go into this kind of things, actually, I wanted to see that I'm duplicating things that Yves Bergeron has been presenting here. So basically, what you see is here actually one of our studies areas in Yukon. And what you see in different colors are actually all the areas which have been burning since between 2015 and 1960 inside there. And what you see actually, these white areas in between there, they're actually not forests inside there. So what you see in these white areas, they are mostly mountain tundra inside there. So what I wanted to show is that in these areas in Western Canada, and I give some examples from Western Canada and some from Siberia, that actually large portions of this boreal forest are burning over time. And then the second thing, what you can actually say there is actually when we look on most of the ecological processes, ecological functioning of these boreal forests, that it's somehow crucial to know how these forests are bouncing back or actually walking back to their initial state there, that they are getting their carbon, they're re-getting actually their carbon storage and other things inside there. And I'm mostly talking about carbon here inside there. And actually, this is one of the research areas. So when we had this first project from the Academy of Finland, which is over since many years, then actually we had this idea that we had here two areas. On the left lower corner, you have one forest area with lots of fires, which is on discontinuous permafrost. So in practice, there's no permafrost there. While then in the northern area, we have actually an area where you have actually permafrost is underlying the forest that we have been looking at. And we had this idea of being the prophets of doom, that permafrost and fires are a combination which would lead to large emissions of carbon dioxide for reasons which I will explain inside there. So going back to that, so what are these interactions between fire and permafrost? And then how do ecosystems go back to their initial state? Now, if we go from this small map, which is just a few thousand kilometers long, we go back to take a bit more distance. Then we did actually one of the first studies that we did with Mario Palviainen, who's at the University of Helsinki. Inside there, we did a kind of a meta-analysis, and actually Yves Bergeron was one of the co-authors, and I'm actually not sure if Igor was also on that list or not. You were not, okay. There were many co-authors because we had lots of data inside there. And what we were trying to do there is actually that we took all the data from chronosequences, so from series of different aged forests, some research that Yves actually has been pioneering with fires. And we were looking on carbon storage in these forests. And we were looking actually how many percent of this pre-fire carbon is actually returned inside these forests over time. And what you find there is actually that on the right side, what you see there is actually that you have there, they find actually that in general, after a relatively short time, let's say 70, 80 years, the above ground carbon returns to something like a stable state, which somehow for, I think, reasons which are based on this experimental design is lower than one actually inside the system. And then on the, or actually one is the maximum plot inside this chronosequence. And then when we go to the total carbon inside the ecosystem, including the below ground carbon and the soil carbon, we actually find that this curve is increasing for a much longer time. So when forests are saturating their vegetation carbon stocks and new tree growth is replaced actually by death of other trees, you still continue to accumulate carbon inside the soil for a pretty long time over these chronosequences. And this was a global study, so we have sites which go from Estonia to northern Finland, Canada, and also Russia. Then we looked actually, Mario looked on it on using this kind of structural equation models, actually path analysis over time. And what we were finding actually was that something like potential evapotranspiration seems to be something like an important factor. And you find a connection actually between the carbon stocks in the living trees, that they have an effect actually on the carbon inside the soil, which is not a big surprise, and on the total carbon. And then this potential evapotranspiration is probably linked to productivity inside there. So potential evapotranspiration to clarify terms between this potential evapotranspiration and actual evapotranspiration, which was a bit used in the previous talk. Potential evapotranspiration is how much water could be lost from vegetation if it was well watered. And it's normally in wet ecosystems, cold wet ecosystems, it's correlated with productivity of these ecosystems, at least if you trust research from the 70s and 80s. Okay. Back to permafrost. In the permafrost, one of the issues that we had is actually what you find there in this graph is on the x-axis, you have the time after fire. And we have here two chronosequences that we measured from Canada and from Russia. And what you find actually when you have a fire is that a fire is burning the humus layer. So that's the equivalent that if you have a house here in the north, in Quebec or here, that you remove the insulation from your house and you will feel it gets pretty cold in the winter. So and then because in these ecosystems, so to go on, I made a bad analogy, so I have to get out of my way there. So basically, because these sites are cold, it's normally cold in the winter, and the average temperature is below zero. So if you have a thick humus layer in old stands, like on the 120 on the right side of the graph, then your soils will freeze in the winter because it's cold and so on. And then they will not melt in the winter, in the summer, because you have this insulating humus layer there on the top. While on the right, on the left side of the graph, you remove the insulation, so your soil will sow deeply in the summer inside these ecosystems. Okay, I saved myself from my own trap here, two holes which I digged, which I'm very proud of. I was really strong in that summer. And here you find after 29 centimeters, actually there on the left side in an old forest, actually, that you hit in August something which is ice inside the site. Okay, so we had this kind of doomsday idea, which we didn't realize there, that if you have a lower soil layer, if your soil is molten to a degree depth inside there, we were thinking that all the carbon which is inside there is actually mobilized and you have huge efflux of carbon from the soil. And this didn't happen. So you see in this graph, which you had on the right side, and that's from Costa yes, on the right side, you find actually that respiration directly after a fire, when the soil is deeply molten, is much lower than in the other side. And that it seems to be highest actually around 60 to 100 years inside these sites over there. And we have this for different chronosequences, and the results are going for 2 permafrost chronosequences in Siberia and Canada go to the same directions. This is from Siberia, actually, from close to Tura in Siberia. Okay, we were then digging a little bit in the processes which are thereafter. What is inside there? Why is doomsday not happening? And our laboratory hero, Heidi, actually, she did this kind of fractionation of soil organic matter inside there. So what you see in this graph is actually different solubilities. So the white thing, so basically the white thing at the bottom is something which is readily available for microbes. It's water soluble or soil organic matter. And then it gets less and less the higher you go in this graph, the less digestible gets this material, soil organic material for bacteria. So what we find is actually that directly after fire, you're burning the litter layer, you're burning the organic material which is available for microbes. And then actually in older forest, soil organic matter gets much more edible, more digestible, less recalcitrant for microbes, at least in the top layer. And then we looked on other processes, and Joensuu actually looked on effects of soil microbes inside there. And we were measuring, actually, we were using metagenomic techniques to evaluate what is the diversity inside the soil. And what we actually were finding was that after fire, inside this graph, that forest age affects climate, affects the roots, affects the amount of soil organic matter. But we found also an important role of this microbial diversity of fungi, and especially bacteria, which seem to affect this CO2 production from the sites. And a model, a structural equation model on the left side, which includes this microbial diversity, was much stronger with an R-square of 0.31 than a model, identical model, where we removed this soil microbial diversity. So we found evidence that this microbial diversity of the soil microbiome strongly affected this CO2 efflux inside there. So as a conclusion, we are actually talking that fire affects, surprise, surprise, that above ground carbon stocks get more rapidly restored than below ground carbon stocks, that this active layer depths increased, but it seemed to have little effects on carbon fluxes, which is different. I mean, it's provisional. There are not many studies from forest, and it's different from results further north in the tundra. And then reduction in the turnover time of carbon due to recalcitrancity seems important. And thank you very much. This is a picture, a typical fieldwork picture. I don't need to tell the names because you will not recognize anybody. Yeah, and there was at least somebody was raising the hand.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, can you hear my voice, Frank?
Yes, yeah. I can hear you.
Yeah. I have one question that I also have the same question in my research area, that how to determine the results is caused by the fire or the geography different, such as the different air temperature and the humidity in different area of your pick the soil samples. How to distinguish between the fire effects and the temperature effect on your results, such as example, especially for the carbon dioxide or the total carbon.
Okay, carbon dioxide thing. So we had similar results. So basically, we did two different experiments. We did in situ measurements, which were shown here, and then where we actually measured the efflux from the soil using cuvettes. And then we did ex situ experiments where we took soil samples to the laboratory and were keeping them inside and we're measuring the respiration from jars with soil inside there, which were kept at standard temperature. And these are complementary, and these give different results. As a warning, in our case, we had quite similar results, let's say qualitatively similar results.
Yeah. I also have one question that according to the Mario Pavlin, the research, the GCB research, how to quantify the research, the recover of the forest effect on total carbon and the temperature different effect on the different place you pick up the soil samples, how to quantify the fire effect and forest recovery effect in your research.
Okay, in the first paper, so you are referring, just to be sure that you are referring to this one, isn't it? In this
this one.
Yes. So in this study, these are climatic differences. So they are average potential evapotranspiration and average air temperature. And we use different indicators, but these are multi-annual averages. So this is the average climate at the site. It's not individual years.
In this paper, have you quantified the fire effects on the total carbon, the effect of fire disturbance effects on the total carbon?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did that. That goes back to this idea, actually, how much the fire severity was changing. And we looked on that. I think it was not super important in this study, if I remember right. And it was not the central idea of the study in a way. But yes, you may have artifacts of soil fire, but you may have artifacts of fire intensity inside the study, which it was not super.
Okay.
So
that's okay.
So you would assume that northern sites, the fire intensity would be low, and in southern sites it would be high, and it was not like this actually. So we had enough stress, yes.
Okay, I'll check this paper later.
Yes.
Thanks.
So
thanks, Frank.
It's global biogeochemical cycles, not global change biology. So GBC, not GCB.
Oh, GBC. Okay, GBC.
Yes.
Maybe I will ask them Mario later. Okay.
Yes.
That's okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Frank.
There any other question? Yes.
Thank you very much. I had so many questions, so I had to select the two best ones.
Okay.
So I understood that after a fire, you have a large amount of soil volume, which can be more active, right? And then respire somewhat more actively, but probably because of the somewhat more stressful conditions when you just expose soil to probably high variability in temperature over the season, right? They do not perform as well. So the increase in active layer doesn't really result in, as you said, in major change in the carbon.
Yes.
Okay, good. And then the second thing.
Oh, it actually, even if the active layer was larger after the fire, the carbon flux was lower.
Okay, so But do you think it's because of just some conditions becomes more stressful and like microbes can just there's a kind of two effects. First, you have just larger volume, and then you have something which compensates for that, right? And what would be this?
I think you are burning a lot of this easily available of this labile carbon, which is on the top layer.
So it's available.
We did not good studies. Our study design was not good to make decisions on this, on your ideas of environmental stresses and other things like this. We were missing a few millions of funding to do this kind of study with data loggers and long-term following, having somebody who's driving up the Yukon Highway all the summer around. So these were expedition type researches.
Just very quickly, in the very beginning, you showed like a meta study with the like effect of time since last disturbance on the flux. So I understood it's mostly like if you think of a regular pine forest, which is not like forest, say black spruce forest somewhere in Canada, you have high activity which with the return interval being relatively like short. So you would probably never really reach this period when you go on the plateau, right? So do you think this meta-analysis has been somewhat biased towards more like fire refugia type sites?
We used, I can give a political answer, which is not necessarily satisfying. So we were using the chronosequences that we were finding inside the literature. And we had chronosequences which were relatively short. When I continue to talk to and then one could, of course, say that when we talk about what Eve was presenting in the beginning, that even in these areas where you have these high fire intervals, very short fire intervals, you will have areas which are protected from fires for a long time. You will have less of these areas. I know that people have been spending, we know that people like you and also me have been spending a considerable amount of time in finding fire or old growth forest, even in natural forest landscapes, when you have enough fire inside there.
Thank you.